January 14th, 2010. It was an ordinary Thursday. She got up. She went to school. She walked the same corridor she had walked for 3 months, eyes low, shoulders drawn in, carrying something nobody around her seemed to notice or care to ask about. She was 15 years old. She was Irish. She was new. And she had been a target since almost the day she arrived. After school, Phoebe Prince walked home. She hung her school bag on the doorknob, she went upstairs, and she never came back down. Her 12-year-old sister found her. Within hours of her death, before her family had even begun to process what had happened, her tormentors were on Facebook. Mission accomplished. She deserved it. Those words were written by children. Children who had sat in the same classrooms as Phoebe Prince, who had passed her in the same hallways, who had, for nearly 3 months, made it their purpose to destroy her. 6 of them would later be criminally charged. This is the story of Phoebe Prince, and the moment the law finally said, enough. Phoebe Prince had come to America with hope. She had grown up in County Clare, Ireland, a quiet green corner of the west of Ireland, where she was known as bright, creative and kind. Her mother had made the decision to relocate to South Hadley, Massachusetts, looking for a new beginning, a chance to build something different, a clean slate. Phoebe was pretty, soft-spoken and smart. She had a soft Irish accent and the kind of quiet warmth that takes time to reveal itself. She was exactly the kind of person who, given time and space, would have found her place. She wasn't given time or space. South Hadley High School had its own social architecture, the kind of rigid, invisible hierarchy that exists in secondary schools everywhere. And Phoebe, as the new girl with the foreign accent and no existing friendships, was starting from the very bottom of it. Early in her first term, she began casually seeing a popular older boy. Text messages, a few conversations in the hallway. Nothing serious, nothing that should have mattered. But it mattered to someone. The boy's ex-girlfriend and her circle of friends decided, collectively, that Phoebe Prince was a threat. And what followed was not an argument, not a falling out, not the normal friction of teenage social life. It was a campaign. She was called an Irish slut in the hallways, labelled a whore in the cafeteria, loudly enough for everyone to hear. Followed down corridors with cruel chants, shoved. Books were knocked from her hands, cornered and laughed at as she walked away in tears. It happened in classrooms, in the cafeteria, in the library, in the corridors between lessons. And it happened online, on Facebook, on Twitter, in texts sent to her phone at all hours. Teachers reportedly witnessed some of it. Nobody intervened. The administration was told. It was described as teen drama. At home, Phoebe was deteriorating. Her mother watched her daughter cry, watched her withdraw, watched the light that had come with her from Ireland slowly dim under the weight of something she couldn't see but could feel everywhere. Phoebe had started seeing a therapist. The family knew things weren't right, but they didn't know how bad it had become, because Phoebe, like so many teenagers in the grip of sustained bullying, shielded her pain from the people who loved her. She didn't want to make it worse. She didn't want to be seen as weak. She didn't want to snitch. And so she carried it alone. During school hours, the cruelty was physical and verbal, but when the bell rang, it didn't stop. It simply moved, from hallways to screens, from whispered insults to typed ones, from faces she could see to usernames she couldn't trace. This is what her tormentors understood, even if they didn't articulate it consciously. that in the digital age, there is no going home. There is no closing the door on it. The abuse followed Phoebe into her bedroom, onto her phone, into the last quiet hours of the night when she should have been safe. Digital shame doesn't fade. It follows you everywhere. Many educators at the time still drew a distinction between online and offline bullying, as though harassment through a screen was somehow less real, less harmful, less urgent. Phoebe's case would prove, beyond any argument, that this distinction was not just wrong, it was fatal. On the afternoon of January 14th, 2010, as Phoebe left South Hadley High School for the last time, one of her bullies followed her. From a moving car, she threw an empty energy drink can at Phoebe's head and shouted insults at her as she walked. Phoebe didn't react. She didn't call anyone. She didn't cry in the street. She went home. She hung her school bag on the doorknob, and a few hours later, she was gone. Her death was immediate national news. Another teenager, another name, another family broken by something that had been dismissed, minimised, and ignored until it was too late. But what happened next? What made Phoebe Prince's case different from the hundreds of similar cases that came before it, and the hundreds that would come after, was the response from the justice system. Criminal charges. Within weeks, District Attorney Elizabeth Scheibel launched a full criminal investigation into the bullying campaign against Phoebe Prince. Her conclusion was unambiguous. The bullying had been so egregious, so targeted, so sustained, and so malicious that it warranted prosecution. 6 teenagers, 4 girls and 2 boys, were charged with a combination of felonies and misdemeanours. Criminal harassment, civil rights violations resulting in bodily harm, assault, stalking. For the first time in American legal history, teenagers were being treated as perpetrators of psychological violence, with real-world criminal consequences. Not school suspensions, courtrooms. The charges sent shockwaves across the country. Some argued they were too harsh. These were children. They didn't understand the consequences of what they were doing. Others said it was long overdue, that cruelty on this scale, sustained, deliberate, racialised and relentless, had always been criminal. The law had simply failed to catch up with reality. The district attorney was direct in her assessment. The conduct was callous. The actions taken were not simple acts of bullying or teasing. They were criminal acts. For once, the law agreed. Phoebe's death shocked the state of Massachusetts into action. Within months, the state passed one of the strongest anti-bullying laws in the United States. Legislation that required all schools to formally report and document bullying incidents, mandated staff intervention, and for the first time gave cyberbullying a clear legal definition and real legal consequences. The law was passed in memory of Phoebe Prince. Her 6 tormentors were ultimately sentenced to probation, community service, and mandatory education, penalties that many called a slap on the wrist. Others saw them as a beginning, the first steps toward a legal framework that took the destruction of a child's dignity as seriously as it deserved. Phoebe Prince didn't die because she was weak. She died because the adults around her failed to act, because a system that was supposed to protect her chose instead to look away, because her dignity was dismantled in whispers and hashtags and shouted insults in corridors where teachers stood and did nothing. She died because shame is a slow poison, and because cruelty, when it goes unchallenged, is contagious. If Phoebe's story has affected you, if you are a parent, a teacher, or someone who sees something of this in a young person's life right now, Sabrina Carroll's book, Voices Silenced by Screens, documents cases like Phoebe's and many others. Real stories, real families, real consequences. Written with the urgency and compassion this subject demands. The link is in the description. And if someone you know is struggling, please use the resources below. They are there for exactly this. The 6 teenagers charged in connection with Phoebe Prince's death went on to live their lives. They graduated. Some went to college. Some moved away. The law, in the end, was lenient, but it had spoken. For the first time, it had looked at what happened in the hallways of South Hadley High School and called it what it was. Not drama, not teasing, not kids being kids. A crime. Phoebe Prince was 15 years old. She had been in America for less than 6 months, and all she wanted was a fresh start.